What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the quarantine zone again, and this time we are here with Kam of the Almighty Massacre. Thanks for being here today, man. It's great to have you here.
Hey, no problem, man. Hey,
It's awesome to have you here with the new album Resurgence coming out, your first album back with the band since the debut. So, being that this is almost like your return album, the comeback album, if you will, how was the overall making of this? How was the experience? Was it almost kind of like, were you going into it with like a preconceived idea of what you wanted the new Massacre album to sound like? Did it pick up where did it feel like you were almost kind of picking up where you left off after From Beyond, or was this just pedal to the metal, new era for Massacre?
uh, kind of all the above, actually. It was really a resurgence. I mean, the name is it's all in the name. Uh, it was a resurgence for me. It was a resurgence for the band itself, and a resurgence for the style of death metal. We say old school death metal now today, but it's always just death metal to me. Because I mean, I've been there from the start, so it's so I guess you could say I'm an old man too. So old school death metal resurgence all around. So yeah, I mean, it was like going forward but also going back, if that makes any sense. It was like moving the band forward, but going back to do it properly, to move it forward properly.
This is like a great death metal movie idea where like you make the first album, From Beyond, and then you just like disappear, like you go into like an artificial death metal coma, and then you wake up and you're like, what the fuck is all these subgenres? What have I missed the last
Yep.
30 years? It almost kind of like that post-apocalyptic scenario.
Yeah, and what a perfect time for it to be also, because it seems to be like we're in the apocalypse now, literally. But yeah, I've joked with it. A lot of people, just like you were just saying, about how I did an interview in Japan, and they were asking the same thing. They were like, "Wow, it just seems like it for you, it just didn't." Nothing changed. Like 20 years, 30 years has gone by, and it's the same. But a lot has changed. I've been doing a lot of other side bands and stuff like that for many years. So that actually was good, because it was also kind of a way to sort of, I guess, feel it out, and kind of know what was relevant in the scene, what was going on in the scene. I try to keep aware. I don't follow too many of the newer bands, but I'm aware of them. I'll listen to them. I'll kind of see where the genre is going. I've heard the subgenres. Some stuff I like a lot, and then there's some stuff that goes way out in left field, and I'm like, what the fuck happened here? But I mean, it's experimental, and I understand it. So it's just not my cup of tea. It's not like something I would prefer to listen to, but I get it. I understand. It's like, you got to remember, when I started back, I'm going back to 1984, actually, if you want to go back that far with my career. When I started death metal, there was probably 10 to 15 death metal bands worldwide. That was it, when I started. Now it's 2021. There's 15 to 20,000 bands, or maybe more, worldwide. So it's going from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, but 30 years of like bam bam. You've got all this stuff in between, and all these side roads, and all these bands that come up and try to do their own thing, put their own staple, or put their own footprint in the sand.
Yeah.
So that, yeah, like I said.
Well,
Go ahead.
you led me into the next question actually perfectly, because between, like, you definitely had a productive 30 years between From Beyond and now, with the other projects you've been involved with. I would say that the direction that the world has taken between 1991 and now has definitely made for a great subject matter of some great death metal albums and stuff. So were you almost kind of like going into this album with like a brand new palette and a brand new slate, or was it almost kind of like reaching back into the old toolbox in a way and kind of bringing back what you were doing before?
Well, I felt that for Massacre, for the band itself, that it needed to go back to formula. It had to go back to what fans of the original band and the original sound it was missing after after so long, and the band has been in different incarnations, and different albums have come out in between debut album and the Resurgence album. And I really felt that it lost touch with what it was. It lost its imagery. It lost its soul, if you want to say. And I felt that it needed to go back. I needed to take it back. Aesthetically, there was a lot of aesthetics that needed to be re-brought back into the band that were definitely missing. And so it was a little bit of like, okay, how do I fix 30 or 25 years of fuck ups? How do I go back and fix it? How do I make it right? So the fan base knows, okay, it makes it apparent that, hey, this guy was missing all this time. Maybe this was the key element. Not trying to say it's all about myself. That I hate to say that because that makes me sound narcissistic. But I really wanted to kind of like say, I needed to fix this. I needed to fix what went wrong. And now's the perfect time to fix it, because now I have creative control. I have the rights to the name. It literally was a thing that I said, it's now or never. It's got to be fixed. So that was my mindset.
Yeah. When it comes to playing with different projects that you've been involved with, I mean, with, between Massacre and between Grotesserie and, Bonar and, the Skeletal and so much, is it almost kind of like a different mind frame or a different creative process, or is there a usual method behind the madness that almost just applies to everything?
Well, there is sort of a method, especially the process which we do it in, because I worked with Roga Johansson for over 15 years, and we have the process of file sharing, but mindset definitely is a little bit different because even though it's all death metal, as a lyricist and as a person who thinks about aesthetics, and I'm literally I'm a musician, but I'm a I really wanted to be a movie director, so I kind of have that kind of in me. I've always wanted to, and I love horror. So when I look at a band and I take a band on a project, I take on a new project, I always look at the whole overall feeling, the story, what I'm going to encapsulate in the band. So each band has always been different. Like Bonar is a very cannibal slasher 80s horror movie kind of band where we have that sort of theme. The Grotesquerie is more of my love of old school gothic horror, not only Lovecraft, which there's a lot of Lovecraft, but I love Edgar Allan Poe. So there's a lot of Edgar Allan Poe stuff in the Grotesquerie. So each project that I take on differently on how I approach it aesthetically.
And that's a excellent demonstration, and like I thought a really good clean cut example of how you're expressing these different concepts and these different themes. Obviously it determines the lyrics, but do you feel that it could also determine the music in itself as well?
Yeah, I do feel that the music, like it's hard because it's all old school death metal, or it's a certain style of death metal. And a lot that Roga writes is very similar, but I've done some other projects without Roga as well. And there's always a little bit of difference in everything that I do. And atmosphere is a big thing where, for example, the way that we do Bonar, it's more raw. I guess you call it meat and potatoes kind of death metal, where it's the death metal that I can feel comfortable doing gore and cheesy lyrics, where the Grotesquerie or something like I do not Robin is more kind of epic and gothic feeling. So I feel that certain phrases or certain words or actually certain subjects wouldn't fit in that band that would fit comfortably in Bonar. I could write about, being a cannibal and eating somebody's face off, but it wouldn't work necessarily in a band like Not Robin, which is very epic and very kind of fairy tale based. So I look at it that kind of way. Massacre to me has always been a band that's been about gothic horror, but very Lovecraft based. So I brought Massacre back to that Lovecraft foundation.
Has there ever been a time where maybe like your personal experiences could influence the lyricism as well, or do you kind of use music as a complete escape from your own personal reality?
It's a little bit of both, actually. I don't take my lyrics too serious, I guess is probably, but I do put things in there. There's influences from my life in general that I'll put into the lyrics, but it's not straight out blatant. It's not like somebody can read and go, oh, I know what he's talking about. But I've had many friends of mine that I've known for years that have known things that I've gone through that'll go, I caught what you were saying in that song. I got it, man. I caught it. And I kind of do things that way.
Yeah, I feel like you approach it both very literally and metaphorically as well. I think that it's very open to interpretation as well. Like, I mean, the grotesquerie, I mean, I love, that sort of like, gothic, atmospheric vibe behind it because to me, like, I've never considered like that slasher, and not to diss it by any means, but I never considered slasher, where, butchering people left and right, really necessarily horror. It's just, how gory can you make it? To me, the idea of a real
Right.
horror is tapping into the psychological anxieties of modern day anxiety, like a real face of somebody that we fear every day, to know that like that modern day stalker is behind us, or that corrupted individual is turning people against us. To me, that's a modern day horror, and I think you're able to tap in both to the horrific fantasy but also horrific realities as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of things, what I've always done with Massacre 2 is, and this goes all the way back to the beginnings, all the way back to 1985, is I've used Massacre as kind of a way to express my misanthropy because in reality I'm a misanthrope. I hate people in, not, individuals, but humanity as a whole. And Lovecraft did that too. I think Lovecraft tapped into that hating of humanity in his stories in a way that he used these monsters or use these creatures or these older gods as sort of a way to kind of say humans aren't as grand and as special as they think we are. We're not the center of the universe. And Lovecraft had a good way of kind of like making these beings, these creatures like Cthulhu, like Ezekatl, like Yog-Sothoth, sort of like these entities that were so above our thinking that they didn't even kind of like look at us as anything but pests that get in the way. So I kind of use Massacre's love of Lovecraftian aesthetics as a way to express my own personal misanthropy. Like, I don't think humans are the center of the universe. I think we are kind of the plague on this planet. We are the virus on this planet. So that's kind of my way of expressing it.
Yeah. So Adam, and you is it fair to say that maybe like the direction that the world has taken maybe influenced some interesting subject matters for future records as well?
Oh, definitely, most definitely. Like I had someone ask me about the Innsmouth strain, which was our first single, and when I was writing it, because we were writing this in the early COVID, right when the pandemic was happening, I knew I wanted to write something about Innsmouth, but I didn't quite want to. I don't like to do direct, directly from a story. If I'm influenced from, I just like to take a little bit of a influence from it. And the word strain just came up kind of like in a conversation. I believe I was talking to my wife, and this was the early time, like I said, really when COVID was really hitting. And I said, it's kind of weird that in the Lovecraft story, Shadow over Innsmouth, it is sort of kind of like a disease that's kind of like in the people of Innsmouth. It's kind of like this genetic disease. I said, what a perfect kind of song to be writing about during this pandemic. So it kind of like all went two and two together. And like I said, somebody asked me, does, like you said, does modern stuff kind of influence you? And I guess that was a case where something that was happening that we're all involved in right now, did influence the lyrics to a certain extent. Even though it's not directly, hey, this is about COVID or this is about a certain pandemic, it does have that sort of like, it was influenced by what's going on, so that it's very diseased. The underlying is about disease and about a strain of something that could eventually kill you.
And is there almost like a lot of research that's involved in your lyricism as well? Are you almost looking at other mediums, whether it's film, literature, visual art, as maybe like?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
most definitely. I'm a big horror movie aficionado anyway, so I love horror movies, and I look at, like, when I go into writing. For example, right now with Massacre, I was watching all the Stuart Gordon Lovecraft films, and going back to everything that it was a Lovecraft film, and pulling out the novels and rereading the novels. But I'm also a tabletop gamer. and I love tabletop games like Arkham Horror and Elder Sign and stuff like that. So I would like look at campaigns that my wife and I played together and like, hey, remember when we played this little scenario where this was happening and the deep ones came in and we had to lure them to the docks, and I think that was in Mansions of Madness actually. So I'd look at all that kind of stuff as an influence for the themes and the kind of mindset that I want to be in. And the same thing happens with all my other projects too. Like when I do Bolnar lyrics, I'll go and say, okay, now I've got to pull out all the old cannibal movies from like Cannibal Holocaust and Cannibal Ferox and stuff like Wrong Turn or anything that has cannibals in it. Hills Have Eyes. And I got to kind of watch all this stuff and kind of get in the mindset, get in the mood. I'll pull out real reports of cannibalism. Like the thing that happened in a couple of years ago, or probably about like 5 or 6 years ago in Miami, where the guy ate the guy's face off. I'll look at real life stuff like that as influence for the mood that I'm going to be in.
If you want to watch probably the stupidest horror movie ever made on cannibalism, you'll either be very inspired by the grotesque nature of it, or it'll just inflict you with so much anger on just how bad it is that it'll make for a great death metal song ever, and that's a Bunny Man. Did you ever see that?
Bunny Man, I've been wanting to see it. I've heard about it, but I haven't seen it yet. No.
All right, then I'll say no more. Just I'd smoke a joint before you watch it. In order to get like that inspiration when you are putting pen to paper, whether it's recording the vocals or writing the lyrics itself, do you almost have to be in a certain place in order to get that creative process happening, or do you almost think of these ideas just out of the blue?
It happens a lot on the toilet in the morning.
No judgment if that's true. Like, I know that sounds funny to some people. Let me tell you, the toilet is a great place for inspiration, I'm willing to bet dollars to donuts that a lot of the great hardcore bands thought of their greatest songs while sitting on the toilet at CBGB's, making sure nobody walks in on them. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I literally think that's why. I mean, there's that old statue called the Thinker.
Yep.
He's sitting there like this, you know.
I've seen it, the real one in person.
It makes you think that's. Hey, man, I looked at that when I was little, and I said, "That's my dad on the toilet." I mean, I completely saw that, and then now I get it. Totally get it. I'm like, yes, that's it. No, really, I honestly have to say, a lot of thought will come up when I wake up very first thing in the morning, and my wife is always like, "What are you doing up?" Because I get up before the coffee, and I'm like, I'm writing notes. I don't know if it's because you dream it. I think Lovecraft said a lot of what he came up with is because he would dream something and wake up. I don't really remember my dreams, but I do wake up with these ideas. And I'm like, if I don't jot that down right now, I'm going to forget, 15 minutes from now. So a lot of like what I do is, I actually do handwritten notes in these kind of things. I mean, wow. I have notebooks full of stuff that I just have sitting around the house. That's just one. Within reach. Here's another. Here's two.
Wow.
Here's three. I just have notes and notes written. And sometimes even sitting down and watching something or watching the news or something, I'll hear a word or there'll be something that comes up and I'm like, I got to find out what that word means, especially like if it's scientific, or something medical. And I'm like, I got to find out what that means because that sounded really cool. So I'll go I'll Google it, then I'll jot it down.
Yeah, I'd imagine that like people think like with death metal lyrics, like you got to resort to horror movies, but I don't think people like watch reruns of the show House. I mean, that show is disgusting and brutal and like dramatic. I mean, I think that I've always said that like there should be death metal bands that get inspiration from places that you wouldn't expect it to be, whether it's like looking at like a Caravaggio painting or watching like a dramatic soap opera or something like that, because that shit is fucking dark and I think could have some extra elements of thought-provoking. Not saying that what your stuff is not thought-provoking, because I think that your Massacre's music definitely opens the door for a great conversation on just how brutal we can go, the direction of death metal. There's a lot of discussions that could be had. I think that there's a lot more that could also be incorporated in the future, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one thing why the genre has lasted so long. If you think about it, if you think about death metal, where it started, what it came from, and what was prevalent as far as music, especially metal music back then, especially the 80s. It was hair metal. Okay, we were coming out of a time when hair metal was like a thing. It was all over the place. Where Kip Winger's fucking video was on every, Only 17 was on every fucking 5 hours on MTV, and Poison and bands like that was. I mean, death metal started out as kind of like I'm an old school punker anyway, so I have my punk roots. So death metal to me was kind of like a way to say fuck all that hair metal, fuck that pretty boy stuff. That's not what this is about. It was angst ridden. Me being a horror fan, I gravitate towards the stuff that's horror anyways, because I love bands that actually do have like horror movie kind of influences, because being a big horror fan, I'll go, oh, okay, I know exactly what movie they're talking about here. I'm one of those kind of geeks that go, okay, I get it. I know when Deicide's saying Dead by Dawn, I know that comes from Evil Dead 2. I know that, even though I think he denies that it comes from that. I'm like, come on, man. It came out the same year the Evil Dead 2 came out. I mean, come on, that's a little, But I'm one of those kind of geeks that will kind of like sit down and I love bands that have really big horror movie influences. Like even some of the newer bands, like Cardiac Arrest is one of my favorite bands from the Chicago area, and they're very horror movie influenced. There's a band from the Netherlands, good friend of mine, Fondo Corpse. All his stuff is very horror movie influenced. So there's a lot of bands that have that horror movie influence.
Do you like Aborted? Because Sven takes a lot of inspiration.
Oh yeah, yep.
Like they're big horror movie fans as well. And the final question I wanted to ask you is, I might be asking this question a little bit prematurely, but I listened to the album, right? I got the early copy of it. Fantastic. I consider it to be the pinnacle of Massacre, or the best Massacre album in the catalog. And I'm not saying this to blow smoke by any means, but you coming back into Massacre is the death metal version of Bruce Dickinson coming back to Iron Maiden. That's how I look at it in a way. Because
thank you. That means a lot. Thanks.
So, from what we're hearing on Resurgence right now, can this be a good representation of what the future of Massacre is going to hold in terms of new music, or what we could be expecting in the future?
And that's a definite yes. I could tell you that the album is only 10 songs out of 15 that we wrote. So there are 5 other songs that we held back because we knew we wanted to release something after the album. We didn't want it to be like, okay, here's the album, here's all 15 songs, bam, and then kind of like fade out. I try to do things methodically. I thought about it. I said, let's put some of the songs that are really good representations of what we wanted to be, kind of match From Beyond, almost to the point where you can put the 2 albums side to side and kind of just see this bridge right across from song to song. Hence why From Beyond ends with Corpse Grinder, and this album ends with Return to the Corpse Grinder. It's kind of like each song bridges itself. But I pulled the songs to the side that I felt were really strong songs, even probably stronger than what ended up on the album. So we have an EP I'm dying to get. I mean, the album's only coming out at the end of this week, and I'm dying for people to hear the EP, because I really feel that I would say that the best way to say it is, if you were alive back during the time when Slayer went from the transition of Show No Mercy to their EP came out, Haunting the Chapel, and how Haunting the Chapel was a step up from Show No Mercy. It was like, nothing's going to be Show No Mercy. This is Slayer. This is fucking amazing. And then Haunting the Chapel comes out, and you're like, holy fuck, what the fuck is this? This is better. And then I would say that our EP is the equivalent of what Haunting the Chapel was for Slayer.
Oh man, now I'm really curious, and that means that your next full-length album is going to be like fucking Rain and Blood.
I hope so. That's what that literally is, like the blueprint, I would say, because the guys are actually talking about writing it now, and I've heard that when you in the first process, you start sharing riffs. The guitar players are sharing riffs, and I'm being a little bit more picky this time around. A lot more picky, I should say, because I'm like, no, we got to get heavier than that, guys. We got to go, we've got to beat what we've already done. It's going to be hard, but we've got to have that level. We've got to go up that level.
All right. Well, it'll be worth the wait, and I cannot wait to see what happens next. Just before we go, is there anything else you'd like to promote for the release of Resurgence? Obviously, thanks to this fucking virus that shall not be named, obviously, touring is questionable at least. It's good to see some things happening now, but we'll be seeing Massacre on the road quite a bit, right?
Yeah, actually, right now, which is cool, is I kind of really should say this really fast. I knew when we got into do this album that the possibility of the album lineup touring was going to be thin because Roga Johansson himself and Brian Jar, the drummer, they don't tour. But I already have a contingency plan. I try to plan out, and I've been working with a couple guys now, and every weekend for the past 3 months we've been rehearsing. So the first show that's coming up is in Atlanta. There's a festival coming up. We're going to be playing that in November, and then we're doing a local show in Florida. And then I think we have something set up for New York, I believe, in Brooklyn.
Yep.
In April.
Yep.
Yeah. So yes, we have all that's all set up, and that's with this lineup with these guys from the band Druid Lord who are helping me out. It's Tony Black helping me out, as well as their drummer Eldon Santos. So everything's going great. I mean, they've got the set down, the old songs and the new songs. It's coming across really great, and I think it's going to be great to get out there and start playing not only the old stuff but these new songs for people.
Yeah, you got to do obviously, I think that if you can make this happen, you're officially a death metal legend in a way where, if you performed Resurgence and From Beyond front to back, both albums.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on time. Unfortunately, I think because we only have in Atlanta, we only have 40 minutes to play. So we had to pick the best songs. I know I've been playing the From Beyond material for so long. I kind of know what the fan favorites are. I know it gets the best reaction. Dawn of Eternity, Cryptic Realms, Defeat Remains, which, believe it or not, is one of the crowds love that song. Of course, Biohazard's a big one. So those definitely in the set list. The new stuff, some of the singles are definitely Whisper in Darkness is everyone loves that right now, and it's fun to play. It's really cool. So that's definitely in the set list. So there's definitely going to be the best of both From Beyond and the best of Resurgence melded together for these live shows.
Awesome. We'll look forward to seeing it. But thank you so much, everybody. We are here with Kam of Massacre. Check out Resurgence. This is Alex from Heavy New York. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, man.